WO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESPS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, it's Thursday, March 4th, and on screen is a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 3:24 a.m. Eastern Time launch from Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center. My name is Andy Tran. I'm a production supervisor here at SpaceX, joining you once again from our headquarters in Hawthorne, California. You're watching a live webcast for our 20th Starlink mission and our 6th mission of 2021. As many of you know, Starlink is a constellation of low Earth orbit satellites designed to provide low latency, high bandwidth broadband across the globe. One of the best parts about working on the Starlink team is you get the opportunity to connect to communities that previously had limited or no access to the internet, and we'll talk more about that later on in the webcast. Tonight's mission also marks the second time that we'll be reusing our Falcon 9 first stage for an 8th time. Falcon 9 is designed for 10 or more flights with minimal refurbishment in between each flight, and this mission gets us one step closer to that goal. We're going to be attempting to recover the booster again on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which is stationed off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. There it is on screen right now. If we are successful, it will mark the 75th recovery of an orbital class rocket. And if you were with us during the first launch attempt this past Sunday, you know that we will not have first stage views during this flight, with the exception of the stage 1 landing view of the drone ship camera that you just saw. However, we will still be receiving telemetry throughout the mission, so we'll make sure to highlight any first stage events as they happen. With that, we are T-minus 10 minutes and 45 seconds till liftoff. All systems are green for an on-time liftoff at 3:24 a.m. Eastern Time.
Hi, I'm Yomezo, a Dragon propulsion engineer here at SpaceX. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 on historic launch pad 39A. And while this pad has seen a lot of launches, including the first moon mission in 1969, tonight will be the first time that this particular booster is flying from pad 39A. All 7 of this booster's previous flights lifted off just down the road at Space Launch Complex 40. Now, Falcon 9 stands 70 meters tall, which is greater than the wingspan of a 747 aircraft, and there are 9 M1D engines on the first stage, which is the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle there. The 9 Merlin engines on the first stage accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to space. About 2.5 minutes into flight, the first stage separates from the rest of the rocket and begins making its way back to Earth to land on our recovery vessel, Of Course I Still Love You, as you see on your screen. Now, while Falcon 9 is named for the 9 engines on the first stage, there are actually 10 engines on the rocket. The Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC, is what powers the second stage of Falcon 9 to its targeted orbit. The MVAC can generate about 220,500 pounds of thrust at full power and can be restarted multiple times to place different payloads into different orbits. Tonight, we are flying 60 Starlink satellites, which are safely enclosed in the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which is that pointed structure you see at the very top of the rocket. This protects the payload from aerothermal loads, heating, and contamination during ascent. Once we reach the vacuum of space, we no longer need the fairing, so we jettison it as the second stage continues on its journey to orbit. Today will be the first time that we are reusing one of our fairing halves for the 4th time. The other half will be flying for the 3rd time. Our recovery ships Go Searcher and Go Navigator are currently stationed in the Atlantic Ocean and will pull the fairing halves from the water upon landing. And with that, let's check in to see how the countdown is progressing.
We are just under 8.5 minutes until liftoff, and leading into tonight's launch, the chief engineer held a technical poll at the T-minus 1 hour mark, and then the launch director held a propellant load and launch go-no-go poll at the T-minus 38 minute mark. Since then, Falcon 9 has been loading propellants since the T-minus 35 minute mark. The vehicle uses 2 types of propellant, a fuel and an oxidizer. For fuel, we use a refined form of kerosene called RP1, and for its oxidizer, we use super chilled liquid oxygen. We also refer to it as LOX. Currently, RP1 is fully loaded on the second stage and nearly fully loaded on the first stage. And as for liquid oxygen, we're loading it right now on both stages. We also load helium to the vehicle, and that began before the webcast went live. We'll continue to top it off until about a minute and a half before launch. And we use this helium to maintain pressure in the tanks as propellant is consumed throughout the mission. In about 25 seconds, engine chill will begin. This is where we allow a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen to flow into the Merlin engine's turbo pumps prior to the full flow of LOX to avoid any thermal shocks to the system. Around the T-minus 5 minute and 13 second mark, checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators will begin. This is also known as the engine wiggle test. We'll initiate these slight movements to make sure that the guidance hardware is a go for flight. The first stage engines also perform the same exact engine wiggle test, and this happens just seconds before ignition. The vehicle is healthy. We are currently working no issues. The range is standing by and currently green for liftoff. The weather is also green for today's mission. All systems continue to be go for a liftoff at 3:24 a.m. Eastern Time.
Now, Starlink was designed to help meet the growing need for truly high-speed, low-latency broadband to underserved and unserved areas. One key advantage of Starlink is the ability to deploy the system quickly. The Starlink kit contains everything that a user needs to get connected to the internet, and once they have a kit in hand, users can be connected in a matter of minutes.
Stage 1 RP1.
For many communities that historically have had poor or non-existent access to the internet, the impacts of the current pandemic have made day-to-day life even more challenging. One such community is the Wise County Public School District in rural Virginia. Now, when COVID forced schools to close and resort to remote education, the community did not have the connectivity it needed to support distance learning for its students. According to a survey conducted by the school district, 40% of teachers and families in the area had limited to no access to internet. In December, the Wise County Public School District announced its plan to provide some families in the area with free Starlink service to promote remote learning. In January, we deployed the Starlink units to the community, and now over 40 homes are now connected with service. We are currently delivering beta service both domestically and internationally, and the team will continue to push towards near global coverage of the populated world in 2021. If you're interested in bringing Starlink to your home or your community, you can head over to starlink.com for more information.
We are currently 5 minutes from liftoff, and Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. We're currently waiting for the transport erector, or TE, to retract away from Falcon 9. The transport erector is that white painted structure right next to the vehicle. In about 40 seconds, the clamp arms at the top of the vehicle will begin to open, and then the strong back will begin to recline away around the T-minus 3 minute and 39 second mark, and it will recline away about 2 degrees from Falcon 9 to its pre-launch position.
Strong back lower has begun.
And you're hearing the callouts that we're beginning that process. The strong back won't fully reach that pre-launch position until about the T-minus 3 minute and 4 second mark. The transport erector has a few jobs. It provides liquids, gases, electrical connections to the second stage, as well as air conditioning to the payload fairing. And on screen right now, you can see the clamp arms are starting to retract away from, to open up and prepare the transport erector to recline away from Falcon 9. This entire process should take about another 40 seconds or so. The first and second stages are both nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. The first stage should finish propellant loading around the T-minus 3 minute mark, and the second stage should finish around the T-minus 2 minute mark. And there goes the strong back, beginning to recline away from Falcon 9 to its pre-launch position about 2 degrees from the vehicle. And as we get closer to T0 at T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 is in startup. And this means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. We'll then light the Merlin engines around the T-minus 2 second mark. We use T-Tab as our ignition fluid, and when it mixes with oxygen, it burns a green colored flame. We then allow the fuel into the thrust chamber, and the engine comes to power for liftoff at T0. The Starlink payload continues to be healthy. The Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather, again, remains good, and the range is also green for launch. And if you're just joining us, this is the 20th Starlink mission for SpaceX and the 6th mission overall in 2021. In just a few seconds here, we should hear the call out that LOX loading has completed on the second stage, and that will wrap up propellant loading for the entire vehicle for today's mission.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
And there is that call out. You can start to hear some hissing and notice some white clouds around Falcon 9. That is normal for us at this stage in the countdown. We are venting liquid oxygen through the transport erector lines, and we'll continue to do so all the way down until T0.
Falcon 9's in startup.
We are in startup. Both stages are now beginning to pressurize for launch. In a few seconds here, we should hear the launch director give the final go for launch.
Falcon 9, Starlink, LD is go for launch.
And there's the final go for launch. Let's listen in to terminal count and watch as Falcon 9 takes our stack of Starlink satellites into orbit.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressure is nominal.
T plus 40 seconds into flight. It is dark, but we can definitely hear Falcon 9. We have successfully lifted off from pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center, carrying our stack of Starlink satellites into orbit. Right now, we're currently throttling down the engines in preparation for max Q. That is the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure, where we'll experience the largest structural load on the vehicle during ascent. So slowing the vehicle down helps during this period.
Max Q.
And there is the call out for max Q. We've just passed the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure on Falcon 9. In about a minute, we have 3 events happening back to back. First up is main engine cutoff, also known as MECO. This is where all 9 Merlin engines on the first stage will shut off to slow the vehicle down in preparation for the second event, which is stage separation. During stage separation, the first and second stage will separate from one another, with the first stage starting to make its way back to Earth for a landing attempt on our drone ship, while the second stage continues its journey with the third event, Second Engine Start 1, also known as SES-1. During Second Engine Start 1, this is where we'll light the Merlin Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage and propel the second stage along with the Starlink satellites into orbit. The first event, MECO, should be happening in about 25 seconds. And there's an animation of where Falcon 9 is currently at, just heading east from the coast of Florida.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
INVAC ignition.
And you saw the visuals on screen. The first stage separated from the second stage, making its way back to Earth. And we have a beautiful startup of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. Coming up in a few seconds here is fairing deploy.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And off goes the fairing halves, exposing the batch of Starlink satellites on top of the second stage. As a reminder, we will be attempting to recover the fairing halves today with our recovery ships Go Searcher and Go Navigator.
Now, after that beautiful launch that we just barely couldn't see, Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit. Stage 1 is going to execute 2 burns in order to make its way back down to Earth. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite, and this will help slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. The second burn is the landing burn. Now, this is a single engine burn that will bring the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You.
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
You can see in that video there that our second stage is looking good. Its nozzle is glowing from that burn that it's currently in. And again, our second stage is carrying our 60 Starlink satellites to LEO, or low Earth orbit. That's about 550 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. For reference, most satellites are actually in GEO, or geostationary orbit, which is over 1,000 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. And the reason that we have our Starlink satellites in this lower orbit is that it reduces the round trip time that it takes for data to travel between the user and the satellite, reducing what is known as latency and improving performance in activities like video calls and online gaming. And again, you can't quite see the first stage, but it is coasting down, getting ready for the start of entry burn in about 40 seconds here. It is coasting using its 4 hypersonic grid fins and the occasional burst of nitrogen gas from its attitude control system. Again, if you're just joining us, we had a successful liftoff. Our first stage is returning, getting ready for its entry burn in 10 seconds here, and then our second stage
is saved.
Looking good with our Starlink satellites.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
You heard the call out for Stage 1 entry burn startup. Again, the entry burn will last about 20 seconds here.
Stage 1, entry burn shutdown.
We've had confirmation of a successful Stage 1 entry burn. And if you've been following SpaceX news, this is actually the second landing that we're attempting in the past 12 hours.
Continue to follow nominal trajectories.
The first one being our Starship serial number 10, which successfully landed in South Texas just earlier this afternoon. And again, our first stage is designed to be reflown 10 or more times with minimal refurbishment between flights, and this is the 8th flight that this particular first stage has been on. In comparison with Starship, our Starship vehicle is designed to be fully reusable. Second stage continues to look good, and we are less than 30 seconds now from the start of our landing burn.
Stage 1, landing burn startup.
You heard the call out for our start of landing burn. This will be about 20 seconds. Hopefully we'll get a great video from our drone ship. Of course, I still love you. You can see it there on your left.
Stage 1, landing leg deploy.
Stage 2, FTS is safed.
Looks like we've briefly lost the video. Hopefully we can get a confirmation here soon about whether or not the first stage has successfully landed. Meanwhile, second stage is still looking good. We did just have confirmation of our successful stage 1 landing. This will mark our 75th successful recovery of an orbital class rocket, the 8th recovery of this particular booster, and our second landing in the past 12 hours. Again, this is the second time that we've recovered a booster for the 8th time. And in just a few seconds here, you're going to hear the call out for, well, we just had a call out for SECO 1, in fact, for our second stage, and a confirmation for a good orbit. And now that stage 2 is going to coast in this orbit for the next 35 minutes or so. And while that happens, we'll take a look at this animation showcasing where we are in the coast phase, and we'll see you back here at T plus 45 minutes for a second stage relight.
Expected loss of signal, Bermuda.